But we decided to use the 16-footer to show you how to install not only foot pedals, but foot pedals that control a rudder. For a couple of reasons. First off, the 16-footer is wide open, so it'll be nice and easy to film. And second, because we know the 16-footer is going to have a rudder on it. This is going to be it's not going to be more difficult for you in the execution of what we're about to do, but you're going to have to put a lot of thought behind it. And, you know, I've thought long and hard about some magical formula that I could give you to say, just put it here. You know, on the plans, just put your foot pedal here and everything will be hunky-dory. Problem is everybody's got different size feet, different leg lengths. Some people like their feet out like this, some people like them straight up and down. And I can't make those decisions for you, so you really don't have to think that through. What I will do is tell you the process that you need to think through, though. Ultimately, what we want to get to is gluing the base plate for the foot braces, the foot pedals, onto the boat. Okay, so in order to get to this, we have to make some of those decisions. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to spin the boat around because I haven't done the other side yet, and I'm going to show you how we got to this point. Okay. I got a couple of different foot pedals here. The difference between the two is one will control a rudder, so the pedal moves, and the other one, the pedal is solid. Okay, so we're going to be putting in the one with the rudder, which is virtually identical to the one without the rudder, with the exception of you got to make sure everything's heading in the right direction for you. Okay, now the ones that we use and sell, are clearly marked right, left. So left foot, right foot, and it's that simple. All right, so I know that heading towards the back of the boat, I want the flipper to go in the back because that's the one that you control when you want to slide your foot pedal forward and backward. All right, so this goes to the back, and when it's down, I should see R for my right foot. So here's where it starts to get a little bit tricky. I have to decide on this boat where I'm going to mount this thing. Okay, now you obviously don't want to go down too low because then your feet are way over to the side. Nobody's comfortable sitting like that, but you have to decide how far up you want to come. Now, we cut wedges here, depending on whose boat it's going to be and how they're going to use it. And we actually have them, and I'm going to encourage you to do this too. Grab somebody that can help you out. Sit down with your back up against the wall to kind of simulate where the seat back is going to be. You want a proper kayak position is you want your legs bent slightly, you know, maybe about a 30-degree angle or so, and your feet on the pedals. Now, the pedals are meant so that up here is where you can actually see that it's shaped like a little foot. Up here is where the ball of your feet is supposed to be. And for those of you who don't know where the ball of your feet is, it's right below the base of your toes. So you want to be pushing it right here. Now, this particular one, in order to be comfortable for the person who's going to use it, they want it to be right about like this. Well, the problem that I have is in order to get that, I've got this big gap up top, and that's why we cut these wedges. Right? So this particular wedge was cut on a table saw at about 20 degrees. And if I slide that wedge underneath there, and now I put the foot pedal right on it, and I put it about where it's going to be, I can see that it's darn near perfect for what this person wants to do, because their foot is going to be just off at a slight angle. Okay, and all this may seem silly, and it may seem like, can't you just pick an angle for everybody? But the fact is, you really can't, right? The key to kayaking is to make sure you're comfortable for long periods of time. Right, so that means make sure your seats are adjustable one way or the other. Make sure your foot pedals are adjustable. Make sure they're at the right angles. So you really want to spend the time, put them in now the way you need to put them in. Okay, so the other thing that you need to determine is where on the boat the foot pedal is going to go. Now, to some extent, the design of the boat is going to give you limitations, right? So I know on this particular boat, I'm going to have a bulkhead right here. So this can't be further past the bulkhead because I'm going to have two cockpits, one in the back, one in the front, and there's a bulkhead in the middle. So I know my limitations for forward is going to be right about here. The limitations for back really depends on how tall are you, right? So what you need to measure is from your backside, from the very back, to where the ball of your feet are when you're sitting straight up, right? So that'll simulate when you're in the kayak. When you're sitting straight up and down in the seat and you're pushing on the foot pedal, you want to know how far it is from your backside to the ball of your feet, and that'll tell you approximately where the pedal needs to be. Now, understanding that you're going to build a kayak that maybe more than one person is going to use, they're fully adjustable. They move forward and back. But there is a limitation to that. On these, it's about 15 inches, which is actually quite a bit. So the person that's going to be sitting in this, I know that from their backside, from where the back of the seat's going to be to where the ball of their feet is going to be is 38 inches. So I actually made a mark right in the boat in pencil. I drew a line, 38 inches. And then I put the pedal right in the middle because they're about average size. Put the pedal in the middle, locked it down, and then I determined where on the boat it needs to be. Now on this particular one, it lines up so that this wedge that I made is right here where this form was. So that makes it really simple for me. So now all I need to know is, okay, well, if I know front to back where it's going to go, how high up is it going to go? In order to get what this person is looking for, I need to be right about there so that their feet will be right like that, okay? And to do this, I measure from here down to here, right? So that's from the heel of your foot up to the ball of your feet. And that gives me, for this person, right around 8 inches. So I want to make sure that from here down to here is about 8 inches so it's nice and comfortable for them. And then later on, you may want to put some neoprene rubber down here, something to make the heel a little bit more comfortable. All right, so again, I know this is a lot to take in, but let's go over the measurements. I know from here, from the ball of the feet to the base, this person's about 8 inches. I know from where this pedal is back to where their back is going to be 38 inches. So I've made a mark and I know that this pedal is going to fall right there. All right, and so I know how far up, I know front to back, and I know the angle, so I made a wedge to go in here. Everything's good. Now I know exactly where I'm going to put my pedal. Again, I know that sounds like a lot, but once you sit down, draw it out if you need to and think it through, it's really not that difficult. Actually, getting it on the boat, you're going to find is a much easier process, all right? So let's go over what we need to do there. These pedals come in a couple of the foot braces come in a couple of different ways that you can install them. One is just a through bolt through the back. Well, my boats are way too pretty to be drilling holes in the side of them and sticking bolts through them, so I'm not going to do that. So they have these pedestals, which are basically mesh bases. All right, let me take it off so that you can see this. Okay, so this mesh base is essentially a bolt onto a mesh base. So what we need to do in a couple of different steps is first attach this to this and then attach this to the boat. And then we can go ahead and put our foot pedals back on. Right, so the process is going to be and it's really particular about how you make this happen, and we're going to show you how to do that, is we're going to, using our foot pedals as the template, we're going to attach these onto here, let them dry using epoxy, and then we're going to, after that's all dry, we'll clean them up a little bit, and then we'll come back and attach them to the boat using epoxy. Then we'll put a fillet in here, fiberglass tape on the bottom, that way there, it'll be nice and strong as you're pushing down on it. Because remember, most people's legs are far more powerful than their arms are. So we want to make sure that it's on there nice and tight so that you're not kicking it off the boat. Okay, well, all of that said, let's start putting this thing together. I'll show you one piece at a time how we're going to do that. In order to do that, we're going to do it over on the bench. We set up this temporary bench here because it's just a lot easier just to film it for the folks behind the camera than it is to do it over there on the bench. So let's take this one step at a time, all right? So the first thing we did before we left the boat is we clearly marked the top of the wedge so that we don't get confused over here and start spinning it around. And I know that the top of the foot pedal, you can see these bolts here, and on the bolt pattern for these particular foot braces, the bolt is at the top of the unit. So I want the bolts to be closest to the top. All right, so now it's just a simple matter of, let's go ahead and take this apart. It's just a couple of nuts. Drop these down. Take these braces off. We're going to flip this red handle up so that we can then slide off the unit. So I'll put that off to the side right now. So all I need in order to glue this down is the actual base plate. So in order to protect everything else, I'm going to move that off to the side. The base plate, we want to make darn sure we don't get a lot of glue and stuff on there, so I'm going to take a little bit of painter's tape. I'm going to put it right over the edges. Don't be cheap with the tape. It's a lot cheaper than these foot braces. Make sure you hang over the edge a little bit. Any place that you think it's possible that glue is going to ooze, cover. Then I'm going to take my studs and I'm going to poke them back through these holes. Flip it over, see if it all looks okay. And it does. Alright, and take my braces, slide them back on. I'm also using them as a big washer right now. And then put the nuts back on. Okay, some of the little details you want to make sure. These are, well, they're kind of an octagon, but one side is longer and flatter than the others. You want to kind of align that right with the top on both sides. All right, now we are just about ready to glue. Okay, so in order to do this, you got to have some things at the ready. I got 2 spring clamps, and I am going to use those not in the middle because that'll cause this to bow because there's about a 1/4 inch gap underneath there. I'm going to use them so that I can hold it down just like that. All right, so I got 2 of those ready. I got my epoxy ready that I'm going to do this with. Basically, I am just going to center this on the wood, and I am going to have it down, about 1/16 of an inch, because I've got enough room so that I can have about 1/16 of an inch top and bottom. So I'm going to use it. So now it's just a matter of mixing up some of the epoxy and getting it clamped. All right, I'll just take a brush. I got some glue tape on here, so I don't get epoxy all over the place. And if you don't know where it's supposed to go, make sure that you mark ahead of time. I got a pretty darn good idea where these are going to go. So I'm going to be fairly liberal about putting the epoxy down. And then I'm going to take the underside of these brackets here and make sure that they get a good coating. That off to the side, and again remembering the bolts go to the high side of the top. Just gotta stick that on there and just get your clamp on. Always do the fine adjustments here after it's on. Now, if you're very careful, you can take any that you may have left over and put it right across the tops. Just kind of smoothing everything out here. Just be careful, make sure you stay within that tape. Okay, so here's something you need to know about epoxy, metal, and wood. A lot of people say that they're good at it. We haven't found anybody that's really good at it, that making metal stick to wood. Now, these have a mesh bottom, a bunch of little holes in it. So one of the keys to giving this as much strength as possible is, I've got one over there that's already set up, and we're gonna clean that up. And you're gonna notice that I allow the epoxy to come up through the holes, cover the top of it, so that basically there's epoxy surrounding the whole thing. And that helps to give it a lot of strength. Now, I'm not so sure that the metal is actually stuck to the wood as much as it is being held there by the mesh itself. And the reason I feel comfortable with that is because after we go back here in the boat, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put fiberglass tape on it. We're going to put fiberglass over the top of these things, and all that's going to add to the strength of this thing. And for everybody out there watching that, if you know of a great epoxy or any kind of adhesive that takes metal and wood and puts the two of them together, I'd love to hear from you. We probably tried 20 of them here in the shop, and they all have different degrees of success. Okay, I'm gonna set this aside and I'm gonna show you when it's done and show you how we clean it up and get it ready for the boat. So it's time to put this onto the boat. Taken a little piece of wood here, wrapped it up in tape, and hot glued it so that I have a shelf, basically. So when it comes time to glue it, I'm all by myself here. I only got 2 hands, and this is kind of like having a 3rd and 4th pair of hands. So now all I have to do is put glue in the back, or epoxy on the back, and then go ahead and use my deep-throated clamp, and I'm going to clamp that right on there. And if you don't have a deep-throated clamp, on the website we have a video on how you can make your own, which is really pretty neat, and it does everything that this does. All right. I would encourage you to remember, I'm going to tell you this now because I'm going to be a little bit busy here in a moment. Remember that this is just a 1/4-inch cedar boat. So when you're clamping, just clamping it tight enough so that you can suck this down to the boat so that it can dry. Right? Don't over clamp because you will break the glass and you'll break through to the wood. Okay. I think I'm ready to go. Now, there is really no benefit to using instant epoxy, although I'm about to. And I'm about to because I like to keep things rolling while we got lights on, cameras on, audio on, and all that. So I'm going to use instant epoxy, mix it up, and stick this to the boat. And then a half hour later, we can go ahead and start doing our fillets and all that kinds of stuff. And that's my plan. So I'm going to go ahead and mix them up right now. I'm going to be fairly liberal about how much I'm going to put on the back. Again, once epoxy has cured, you want to make sure, you remember that mechanical versus thermal chemical connections that we were talking about. Epoxy's cured, we're not going to get any chemical bond at all, we're only going to get a mechanical bond, right? So I scuffed all this up with sandpaper. I made sure that this is nice and scuffed up with 80 grit paper, and so that will give me the best adhesion that I can possibly get. The only other thing that I can urge you to do is make sure whatever you did over there, you're doing over here. Because unless your legs are different lengths, you're going to want to make sure that you set these pedals up identical on both sides of the boat. Line up with the other side. I'm just going to set it right there on that handy little ledge. Hit my clamp. Bear down. Lightly bear down. It's a slippery guy. I don't want to move around on you, so you have to hold it in place. And just clamp till you get a little ooze coming out. All right, well, 1 clamp should be enough because the boat goes a little bit concave there. So as you suck the middle in, the 2 ends should already be tight up against the boat. Well, I'm just going to let this set and give it a chance to harden before I mess around too much and make it move. I don't want that to happen. And then we'll go ahead and do our fillets, do our glass, and we'll talk about cables and rudders and all that kinds of stuff when the time is right. Did a couple of things while the camera wasn't on. Put the fillets in up here at the top so that we have a nice rounded corner there. Put a fillet in under here at the bottom so that there's a nice smooth transition from this to the hull. Because remember, fiberglass doesn't like sharp corners. And then we took some fill, and all around here where the holes are, we went ahead and we spread or we butted in some epoxy with filler. Because again, I think a lot of the strength comes from the actual epoxy going over, kind of like rebar in cement, right? So we're basically using the holes inside of this and we're getting epoxy above it, below it, and contacting all around, and that's going to give us some more strength. Now what I'm going to do is put some fiberglass tape on this. Get my epoxy mixed up. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of tape here from the cloth, from the leftover cloth from doing the bottom and the inside. And then I cut on this particular one, it's 14.5 inches from post to post. And you can see on each post, I've got a liberal amount of painter's tape. And we're just going to slide that right over the top and put it down. I'm just going to take this chip brush and I am going to paint the cloth on. Again, starting from the middle. Always like to start from the middle on cloth. Working our way out. Now, we're going to try to be as liberal as possible with this without having runs going down the boat. And then we'll come back and sand it and feather it all in later. We want to make sure that we get good contact, and because we can't use our spreaders here, got to kind of do it all with a brush. Cannot stress enough how important that blue painter's tape is around those posts, because this would be a horrible time to render those posts useless. And if you get them all gunked up with epoxy, that's pretty much what's going to happen. Alright, well, you can see I put some gloves on. That's because, whoops, after you get all this soap, sometimes the easiest way to do things like get rid of these little strings and such and to make good contact is to just take your finger and run it right along that seam. Make sure that you have these studs taped up really tight, because this would be just a horrible time to find out that you ruined the threads on your studs. All right, that's it. I'm going to move quickly and see if I can get that other side done now.